valuable protection, which...
Legal challenges facing logistics companies. Well, joining us to speak about that today is Ann Christopher, Vice President of Kinco Logistics Services. Ann, welcome.
Thank you, Russell.
And in negotiating logistics contracts, what would you say are the greatest challenges that you might face?
The most important challenge that we need to realize and face is that many times our interest is somewhat opposed to that of our customer base. Very often they have an expectation that we are providing full coverage and liability associated with their inventory and their product, assuming all risk, so to speak. And that's something that, a challenge really, that we really need to make sure we explain with our customer base, make sure they understand that based on the Uniform Commercial Code, there are certain parameters with respect to warehouse operators' liability and exposure associated with their inventory.
You know, you mentioned liability. That leads to a question about insurance. Here's the question. What would you say that providers and their customer base, for example, manufacturers, need to understand about liability and insurance?
Well, I think they need to understand that they, as the owner of the goods, need to maintain insurance coverage on their inventory while it's within the warehouse operator's possession. For example, if you're storing pharmaceutical product for a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, the inventory alone can run in the trillions. That's trillions of dollars. As such, there's no way that a warehouse provider can assume that liability associated with that inventory. It would shut down that warehouse operator. They'd be closing their doors, number one. Number two, basically it's impossible for a warehouse operator to obtain all risk insurance coverage. Really, a warehouse liability is tied to its negligent actions. In other words, a warehouse will only, and their insurance coverage will only respond in the event warehouse negligence is involved.
I want to ask you about a certain area of the law, if you will. Is there such a thing as warehouse law? If so, can you define it? And how does it impact, the logistics industry at large?
Absolutely. Warehouse law is a real niche area of the law. Not many attorneys even are familiar with warehouse law, but it's...
Well, let's let them in on it. What is it?
That's actually found in Article 7 of the Uniform Commercial Code. And really what warehouse law is, it really defines the bailee-bailor relationship. And that means a bailee assumes care, custody, and control of a customer's inventory or product for a finite period of time, after which it surrenders that goods back to the owner of the inventory. So warehouse law really does define the bailee-bailor relationship, derived out of British common law. With that, we see liability standards are identified, the duty of care, and warehouse law also provides the warehouse operator with a very valuable right, which is called the warehouse lien.
Well, let's turn now to warehouse liens. Protection the warehouse lien provides for the warehouse operator. How would you characterize that?
The warehouse lien is a very, very valuable protection which offers the warehouse operator recourse in the event they have a delinquent customer that's not paying on its account. In other words, the warehouse operator may sell, if it follows certain protocol as defined within the control, inventory, so to speak, to make them whole, basically, to respond for any outstanding account balance. In addition, the warehouse lien, although you cannot enforce your warehouse lien in the event of a customer bankruptcy, it's evidence of a warehouse operator's status as a secured creditor in a bankruptcy situation. Interestingly enough, this is the only industry that has such a lien right, much broader in scope than, say, a transportation lien. And under bankruptcy law, there's no superior or senior right, not even that of a lending institution or a bank is superior to that of a warehouse operator. So it is a very, very valuable protection for our industry.
But you're suggesting that absent bankruptcy, that the operator can sell the goods in order to make himself or herself whole?
Absolutely. Certainly there is a defined protocol that must be followed in order to enforce the lien. In other words, you need to provide notice to the delinquent entity and any other known goods to entities that have an interest in the goods. You need to provide an opportunity for them to make whole on the account, to make payment, so to speak. And then there's a designated process in terms of going forward and providing sale. You do not want to, get pennies on the dollar if you're selling, for example, if there's lien associated with electronic products. Certainly, it's not in the best interest of the warehouse to accept pennies on the dollar for the electronics, because again, you want to make sure you're doing it in a very legitimate format. Getting different quotes with respect to the potential valuation of the inventory, et cetera.
Let's shift our focus to regulations, to regulatory schemes, and how these are a challenge for the logistics and warehousing industry. What would you say are the greatest regulatory challenges now?
Well, that's a very broad question. There's so many different regulatory areas that impact and interface with our industry. Certainly, if you're storing chemical product, being aware of EPA regulations, potential disposal issues, making sure that you're storing in accordance with proper standards associated with storage and handling. DOT regulations, again, with hazardous materials, making sure that product is shipped out with proper labeling, shipping descriptions, making sure that again, as the owner of the good, your customer has an obligation to identify you of those potential regulations, but certainly you need to be in compliance. Labor laws are obviously huge when it comes to our industry. ADA, which is the American Disability Act, you need to be sensitive to that. Hiring practices, things of that nature. And then of course, because we're in a very, very labor intensive industry, OSHA regulation is very, very important to be aware of and sensitive to. Forklift operating standards, general workplace safety, etc.
You've just outlined, and we've just discussed a number of laws, rules, and regulations that affect warehousing, affect the logistics industry at large. My question to you is that in dealing with customers, manufacturers, shippers, whatever they may be, do they always bring an awareness of all of these issues to the relationship, or is it something that sometimes the provider needs to school them on?
Well, again, that's almost a trick question, if you will. Certainly from our perspective, the customer should, as the subject matter expert, be providing us with the guidance, direction associated with their inventory, with the goods, temperature requirements in the food grade area, any environmental regulations. However, the fact is that very often we have customers that are not super knowledgeable with respect to their inventory and their goods. And those are the customers that you really want to scrutinize with due diligence and at least know enough to know, okay, what's lacking, what additional information do we need to properly store and handle the inventory, so to speak. Your insurance carrier may serve as a resource. Googling is obviously a fantastic resource. Looking at material safety data sheets. But as we see, a lot of times customers are not necessarily forthcoming or able to provide all the information that is necessary to handle their inventory.
Conversely, though, I would think that it's advisable for shippers, manufacturers to seek providers who themselves are knowledgeable about these issues.
Absolutely. You do want to be knowledgeable. Again, you want a partnership with both parties being knowledgeable with respect to the parameters associated with proper storage and handling of the inventory. In other words, a manufacturing entity, if they're dealing with pharmaceuticals, is going to want to deal with a 3PL that has had some experience and some foundation in that area, and likewise with food and chemicals.
Well, this has been valuable information, a valuable conversation. Ann, I know you're busy here at the conference, but you found time to meet with us. I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Russell.
That's Ann Christopher with Kinco Logistics Services, and speaking with us today about legal challenges facing the logistics industry. Thank you for watching.